developer paid for new property. Let the developer pay for your new apartment and get massive stamp duty savings. If you want to see how it works and how you can benefit in 10 minutes from now, if you want to see how it works and how you can benefit in 10 minutes from now, all will become clear. Hi, I'm Simon Atkins, helping you buy and invest in Perth's brand new property market. Hi, I'm Simon Atkins, helping you buy and invest in Perth's brand new apartment market. So what does it mean, buying off the plan? So buying off the plan is the purchase of a brand new unbuilt apartment. So that's when you're buying off the plan. So strictly speaking, buying off the plan is when you purchase an apartment prior to construction beginning. But it's used more generally as a term for buying a new apartment before the development is completed. So when I refer to off the plan in this video, I'm referring to a purchase before the project is complete. Okay, so before the titles are issued, etc., and you can settle on the property. So the advantage of buying off the plan, the advantages of buying off the plan. So I've got 10 advantages for you to buy off the plan right now. So we have stamp duty savings if you purchase off the plan. That's number one. So number one is stamp duty savings. So you get concessions at the moment by purchasing a brand new apartment off the plan. And I'll put these rates in the description below, but you can save up to a maximum of 100%, yep, 100% of your stamp duty bill, or a maximum, up to a maximum of 50,000. So number one, stamp duty benefits. So concessions, save money on stamp duty, whatever you want to call it, but you get a reduction on your stamp duty if you're buying a brand new apartment off the plan right now. So you can save a maximum of 100% of your stamp duty bill. Yep, you heard that right, 100% of your stamp duty bill. And a minimum of 37.5% of your stamp duty bill, depending on when you buy, and I'll cover that later. Okay, number two, the developer pays for the construction, unlike a house build. So when you build a house, there's progress payments, and you make those payments as the house gets built. But with an apartment, the developer pays for the construction, and you just settle on it at the end. So number three is in most cases, you lock in the price when you put a deposit down. So the advantages of that is, of course, when you complete on the property, maybe a year, 2 years later or whatever, you can potentially be buying an apartment that's worth a lot more. So the exception to this is if you buy during pre-sales, which is before construction starts, and for some reason the development doesn't make sense and the pre-sales required are no longer feasible. So then they give you your deposit back, and they'll potentially walk away from the development altogether. So, and they cancel your sales agreement gets cancelled. So because we get involved in a lot of developers, because we get involved with the developers in most cases prior to the development going ahead, we ensure that before we take on the development that it's feasible, because we don't want to be selling a development that ultimately doesn't go ahead, because that's just obviously wasted time and energy for us. So locking in the price has created some huge price disparities for clients that purchased off the plan early on in projects, and we've seen that 2 years ago or so when people started buying off the plan as the market started rising. And once you've locked that price in, the developer starts working for you. And because it's a commercial enterprise, developers are always trying to push prices to go higher. So in a sense, they're working for you from that point. So as you can see, those prices of other apartments rising is pushing the price of your apartment up. But just remember, you've locked it in place by putting that deposit down, the price in place. So number 4, on some of the more expensive developments we deal with, people that have purchased early on have been having huge gains, and I'm talking like $500,000 plus in price gain on settlement. So at the other end of the spectrum, we've had people buying, for example, 1-bedroom properties that have seen increases of over 100,000 plus. So very, very big percentage gains there by buying off the plan at the right time of the market. So am I saying that this will always happen? So no, I'm not saying that. But these kinds of results won't end anytime soon, because due to the many, many constraints in the Perth market and the property market in general. So there's plenty of pressure on that, and the apartment market specifically is under a lot of pressure because we're just not building enough apartments. So number 5, buying off the plan can also give you time to get financing or other things lined up before having to settle on the property. So that obviously suits a lot of people. Lock in the price, get your ducks in a row. Number 6, customisations. If you buy early enough, most people, number 6, customisations. If you buy early enough in the development, you can customise the apartment to suit your own needs, which is a big bonus for a lot of people. So number 7, on or before the developer has ordered fixtures and fittings and the cabinetry and things like that, you normally get a choice of 2 schemes. So you get a couple of different options that sometimes you can mix and match at the earlier stage. So number 8, if you're a downsizer, and this is a big one, if you're a downsizer and you have 2 properties, you're waiting to be completed, your house So number 8, if you're a downsizer, I really like this one. If you're a downsizer and it means you can have 2 properties working for you. So whilst you're waiting for the build to be completed for your apartment, your house is still increasing in value, and your apartment can be also generating capital gain for you because you've locked in the price, as I just mentioned before. So you're getting 2 properties going up instead of 1. It's control of that apartment without ownership and can work extremely well. And as I mentioned, we've seen this happen a lot. So great strategy, as I mentioned, when you're purchasing in a growing market. And as I mentioned, this is going to keep continuing for some time. So you can lock in the price and then let the market pressure increase the value of your property prior to settlement. So great concept, great idea there. And like I said, seen it work plenty of times. So 9, deposit bonds. Often developers are able to use deposit bonds with a deposit to hold the price of an apartment until settlement instead of using your own funds, your own cash, because you might not have access to it. There's a fee associated with a deposit bond, depends on the time frame, and the amount of the bond will depend on the actual fee that you pay. These can be incredibly useful if you don't have, as I mentioned, access to the cash, or you don't want to break a term deposit or something like that and lose the interest, and you can use the deposit bond instead of your own cash to hold the apartment. So another great option there. So number 10, unlike building a house, if things go pear-shaped, i.e. the builder goes bust, then you're left with a half-built house. So we've heard stories about that quite a lot over the last few years since COVID, and you have already got plenty of money already paid for the build potentially. You might have, the place might be half completed and you've paid $200,000 or $300,000 for the property, or $150,000 or whatever it is, and you've got that locked away. And so because you are an individual that's engaged, an individual that's engaged, a builder who has been at least mostly paid by the progress payments that you make, it means that you're really carrying the can for that. So it's only really 2 parties involved in this scenario, you and the builder. And so the builder's kind of been paid by you, but then you're kind of left blowing in the breeze out here on your own. Whereas different scenario with an apartment, there's often many stakeholders that have already spent lots and lots of money on the development. As I mentioned, the development gets paid on your behalf to be finished. So not you, them. They've paid that money. And instead of one individual being affected, as in your own home build, all buyers are also affected on the other side of the equation in that development. So there's a lot more stakeholders. You also don't have as much invested as the stakeholders do in a build, as I mentioned, unlike by building a house. So often private bank or private funding or bank funding is involved in the development. So all stakeholders obviously want to get the development finished. And we've had seen a development before where the actual builder went bust and the developer picked up the slack, and they subcontracted the build, the tradies, to get the build completed, and it worked pretty seamlessly in the end, and everyone was very happy with it. So of course there are things like risk involved as well, and I'll touch on some of those. So the risks are the development doesn't go ahead because it's no longer feasible, and you wasted time in growing the market without ultimately anything to show for it. So you put a deposit down, you might have that tied up for a year, and then it's not feasible and it doesn't go ahead. So obviously a risk there, because particularly if the market's moving, you don't get any benefit out of that 12 months. The sunset clause on the contract is designed to let you out of the contract if the development drags on so long that you decide that you don't want to go ahead anymore. So if you don't have the keys to your apartment by the time the sunset clause comes around, you can walk away from the contract and get your deposit back. So this could tie up your deposit for an extrapolated period of time with nothing to show at the end of it, of course. And by law, they don't really have to give you your deposit back until the sunset clause or date has been reached. So quite often you get it back before that, because the developer just cans the development really and decides that that's not going to work, and you get your deposit back. That seems to be what happens in most cases. So delays can be frustrating, and of course if you can't get in when you want, and can create frustration, and can extend the timeout, which can happen, particularly since post-COVID, when we've been short of tradies and things have been extrapolated out a little bit longer, although that seems to be correcting itself a little bit now. So another important part is the different stages of buying off the plan. So, and that really kind of determines how much stamp duty savings that you get. So during that period of time, there's going to be, well, let's say, there's going to be three real different periods of time that you could potentially buy the apartment. So the two stages that you can buy considered off the plan, as I'm talking about it, and as I'm referring to it here, pre-construction is the first one, before the developer, as I mentioned, has gone to site and started the construction works. So you can save the most amount of stamp duty during pre-construction, and also to stand to gain the most by purchasing at the cheapest point of the development, because prices have been rising over the course of the project. So the earlier you get in, potentially the more you have to make during that course of the project. As I mentioned before, the developer starts working for you because they increase pricing in that development as the market climbs. So at this stage, at the moment, you can save a maximum of 100% stamp duty at pre-sales, at pre-construction, and a minimum of 50% stamp duty, and up to a max of 50,000. So very, very good stamp duty concessions there. It is probably the time when you carry the most risk, but it's also the time when you can also benefit the most, which is normally the case. So the other period of time that you can purchase is during construction. So obviously that means when the developer has actually started building the development. They've gone to site, they've begun the site works, and construction has begun. So the main difference is that often prices have increased by this stage, particularly given the market that we currently have here in Perth. So stamp duty benefits are also reduced by purchasing at this stage. So you can currently save a maximum of 75%, which is still fantastic, or a minimum of 37.5% stamp duty to a maximum of 50k. So those benefits are still very, very good, even if you buy during the construction process. So the third time that you can buy, of course, is not off the plan, it's once the development's completion. And sometimes there's stock left over that people buy, or the developer holds stock back at the end of the development to sell as completed. So at that time, it means that because, well, once it actually hits practical completion and titles are issued, which is sometime around that completion time, then it means that there's no longer stamp duty benefits are available. So they're off the table at that point. So sometimes the apartments can be finished, but they haven't quite got to practical completion. And then the issue of titles. And at that point, that's when it stops. So sometimes there's a small window there when they are completed, when you can still buy. But so just lastly, I'll go through the process. So just so you understand an overarching scenario as to buying off the plan. So if the average Joe just buys something fairly, which is, 90%, 95% of the time, okay? So if you've decided to buy an off-the-plan apartment and you want to lock down a price and you sign a purchase agreement, these are normally pretty lengthy documents because they include such things as the engagement of a strata manager, which they have to go through, what their rights and responsibilities are, what your rights are, what the strata fees are going to be, the first year's budget, and all that type of stuff, all the complicated stuff, but it's all in there. And we've got other things such as the joint form of general conditions, which you get for every property that you buy in Western Australia, apartment or otherwise. And it's that stage you have around, once you've signed the contract. So I'll just go through the process now as to actually buying off the plan, just briefly, so you get a high level view, so you kind of understand how it works, because most people just have not purchased off the plan before. So once you've decided that you want to buy an apartment off the plan and lock down a price, you sign a purchase agreement for that particular property. So these are normally pretty lengthy documents because they've got included in them such things as details about the strata, who the strata manager is going to be, what their obligations are, what they're going to charge, the first year's budget, sometimes 2 years budgets, and all that type of stuff. Joint form of general conditions is tucked in there as well. So there's quite a bit in there, but it's pretty straightforward all in all. So once the buyer signs off on the price and conditions, so once you've signed that particular sales agreement, we then forward that to the developer to countersign and accept the purchase, much like buying a house or any other property. You sign the purchase agreement, then it goes to the seller to countersign the purchase agreement. At that stage, you've got around about 1 week, it's normally 5 days or 7 days, to pay the deposit, but that can be extended. And the deposit is often 10% of the purchase price. So the deposit then goes into a trust account until the future settlement time comes around. So if it's $20,000 or more and held in trust for 60 days or longer, then we can put the money in a trust term deposit where it can accrue interest on your behalf and you get the interest paid out at the end of that time. So during the build period, we then keep you up to date as to how the development is progressing, so you can see there's progress and things are happening, and then there's really nothing for you to do during this time unless there's personal things that you need to attend to around that particular purchase. But as I mentioned before, it gives you time to get your ducks in a line, any financing or anything else that you have to do before that time comes around. So once the development is an estimated 3 months out from completion, we contact you and let you know and give you some time to sell a house, arrange a finance, or do whatever else that you need to do to get to settlement. So it's also worth noting that off-the-plan purchase agreements are unconditional agreements, so that you are obligated to settle on, i.e. they aren't subject to finance or any other conditions. So they can be, though, closer to completion or at the time of completion. So they can have conditions at that stage. But about a week before you are due to settle on your apartment, you get an opportunity, of course, to inspect the final product to ensure you're happy with the overall finish of that particular apartment. At this stage, you can raise defects if you find some things, scratches on the wall or whatever that you could that could do with attention. So the list carries over after settlement and allows you to continue to raise any issues that might happen during the time that you're living there, and that's normally for another period of at least 6 months after that. So pretty straightforward. The process really is not complicated at all, and like I said, unlike building a house, you don't have those ongoing progress payments. The developer pays for that on your behalf. You just put the deposit into the trust account that's held on your behalf, and away you go. So I hope you got some value out of this video, and that purchasing off the plan can be a little bit easier for you in the future. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and take it easy, and I'll see you next time.